I thought my stylist was just flirty. Then I found what they'd been saving about me, and I don't think this is normal. I'm in my 30s, and my hairstylist is in their 40s. I've been going to this same stylist for about 9 months now. This was my 6th appointment with them. Usually, I just get a trim or a maintenance cut to keep my hair in style. But today, I was ready for a big change. My hair had grown all the way down to my lower back, and I decided to go for a dramatic A-line bob. Because it was such a big chop, my stylist wanted to document it. They took a picture of the long hair lying on the floor, planning to post it on social media and maybe do a before and after collage. I didn't mind at all. It seemed completely normal to me. Then, they grabbed a broom, swept up the hair, and left the dustpan on the counter for a bit. All of this felt like standard stylist behavior. A few minutes later, I watched them take the broom and dustpan to the back of the shop. They were gone for a little while, but I just figured they were cleaning up. Afterwards, they popped outside for a smoke break. I decided I needed to use the restroom, which is also located at the back of the shop. On my way to the bathroom, I didn't notice anything unusual. But as I was coming back out, something caught my eye, a small clear tote sitting on a table. It had no lid, and my name was taped onto it. Peering inside, I saw it was filled with my hair. At first, I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was just today's hair. But then I looked closer. The tote clearly contained clippings from several of my past appointments, several different lengths and colors. Mixed in with the hair was what looked like potpourri and maybe even a little sand. Tucked into the hair were printed photos of the cut hair, each one dated. The printer was right next to the tote, with today's discard photo sitting in the tray. I glanced around and didn't see any other containers like this. Just this one. With my name. Filled with all my old hair. I felt a rising sense of unease. It was just so unsettling. My heart was pounding, but I managed to take a quick picture with my phone before heading out to the main salon. A few minutes later, my stylist returned. I casually mentioned having gone to the restroom, and I swear, they tensed up immediately. But they said nothing about it. I just sat there, letting them finish styling my new bob. I paid, thanked them, and left feeling rattled. As someone who is socially anxious and painfully introverted, this whole experience felt like an absolute nightmare. When I got home, the more I looked at that picture of my hair-filled tote, the more creeped out I became. That sense of it just kept growing. After stewing on it for an hour, I finally worked up the nerve to text my stylist. I sent them the photo and wrote, "Hey, so I saw this and didn't know what to make of it. Can you help me understand what this is and why you have it? I'm not comfortable with you having this and request you please discard the contents. Also, even though I loved my cut, I believe it's best if I find a different stylist. Now, I'm just waiting, equal parts anxious and weirded out, wondering what the hell is going on and if I'll ever get an explanation that makes sense." Update 1. It's been about a week, and with the holiday chaos, my life has felt completely scattered. Still, after everything that's happened, I decided to go to law enforcement and make a report last Monday. Something in me knew that if this person kept up their relentless contact, I'd probably have to go back. Let me walk through exactly how everything unfolded. Last Saturday was the last semblance of normalcy I had. Up until then, things had been wild, but what happened next took everything to a new level. Sunday morning, I woke up to a barrage of texts from the stylist. My phone lit up with one after another, enough to slice through my do not disturb setting. I have a safeguard on my phone that lets repeated calls or messages through in case of emergencies, but this was the furthest thing from that. The messages were unsettling. I remember staring at my phone in disbelief. None of it made sense. It was so outrageous that I couldn't even process it, let alone respond. I needed time to think, to sort out how to handle something so unhinged. By that afternoon, the calls started. One after another, the stylist called me 14 times, leaving a voicemail with almost every other attempt. Most just muttered, "Call me back," or demanded a text. But 2 of the voicemails broke through all sense of normality and deeply unsettled me. I don't want to repeat the actual words, but the gist of the first was enough to chill anyone. The second, left late on Sunday night at exactly 11:38 p.m., lodged itself in my mind. I got rid of it except for one lock. I found out I like watching your hair burn more than I liked keeping it. The implications made my skin crawl. Through all of this, I remained silent. I refused to answer any calls, texts, or messages. I was shaken, truly scared at this point. With everything spinning out of control, I made up my mind. I was taking Monday off work and heading to the police. Whether they could do anything or not, I wanted my side of things on the record before the situation escalated further. That night led into Monday, and I woke to yet another shock, an invoice in my email inbox. It stood out sharply, $375 charged as a client breach of contract fee, and that was just the subject line. The email body contained a single sentence, "For being a bitch." I couldn't believe they'd send something so blatantly self-incriminating from their own business email. Beyond the sheer harassment, the original dispute was never even about a contract. I never signed anything, and the original service price was $350, not $375. They couldn't even get the extortion right. I finally replied. I sent a clear, straightforward response. I had never signed a contract and I demanded all communications from them cease, immediately and permanently. Around 9:45 Monday morning, I gathered my courage and left for the police station. I live in a rural area, and the drive to town means there are huge stretches where I have no cell reception. As soon as I got back into service, my phone buzzed, 4 new voicemails. I didn't even have to guess who they were from. At the station, I gave the officer my statement and provided every scrap of evidence, the emails, the calls, the texts. They told me, at a bare minimum, this was menacing and harassment, especially given the persistent and disturbing nature of the calls. That voicemail about burning my hair? They said it was potentially concerning. The officer advised me to find a legal representative, just in case this person tried to pull something in civil court with their bogus invoice. It was suggested I could change my number, but honestly, having documented evidence of more contact, especially after I told them to stop, would only solidify my case. On Tuesday, I reached out to a lawyer and left a detailed message. Unfortunately, with the holiday, they're out until next Wednesday. All I can do is wait and hope they'll have some solid advice for me when they return. As the days have passed, the stylist hasn't let up, the texts and calls still roll in. On Thursday, without a shred of self-awareness, they even sent a happy Thanksgiving text. The situation feels surreal, but at least the authorities and a lawyer are now in the loop. I'm not backing down. Update 2. I woke up to a flood of messages and requests, and wanted to reassure everyone that I'm okay and safe for now. This person has kept up their attempts to contact me, reaching out regularly through phone calls and emails. I have my own means of personal protection, I'm comfortable with it and know how to use it, so I'm not especially worried about my own safety at home. I'm also almost completely convinced this person hasn't figured out where I actually live, so I don't expect any unexpected confrontations to happen here. Our house and property are locked down with full camera coverage, so if anyone, or anything, were to appear, we'd know about it instantly. That brings some comfort in all of this. On Tuesday, I'm planning to share a more thorough update. I'll include more of the texts and emails I've received up to now, especially about a specific incident that went down on Friday. I have an appointment to speak with another officer to talk about pressing potential criminal charges and the legal repercussions this stylist could be facing because of her actions. I genuinely appreciate all the concern and support. Hearing others confirm that this behavior is absolutely bonkers is both validating and a bit of a relief. For now, I'll leave you with one of the texts from this week. I think it really speaks for itself. Maybe it'll make you laugh, make your skin crawl, or just remind you how not to make new friends. Update 3. It's been a wild ride lately, far more intense than I ever could have predicted. I know so many people seem invested in what's been happening, and honestly, I get it, because if I weren't living it, I'd be glued to every twist too. Sorry for keeping everyone in suspense, but I'm not someone who can just spill my thoughts the moment they arise. I have to pick them apart, process them, and give myself space to figure out how I feel. Things have been moving both excruciatingly slow and scarily fast at once, so let me walk through what's actually been happening. This past Tuesday, my husband and I drove out early, before sunrise kind of early, to meet with law enforcement again. I'd arranged to see my lawyer too, partly because of the endless texts, incessant calls, and emails, but mostly because I wanted to take legal action for something that left me speechless and furious. The stylist, as I've dubbed her, had, apparently tried to cancel my credit card. Yes, you heard that right. She somehow got her hands on the last 4 digits of my card and called up customer service, pretending to be me. She tried to cancel the whole account, and my line of credit, all that. I only found out because the fraud department called shortly after, confused about my supposed decision to spontaneously close my own account. Thank goodness, the stylist failed. She couldn't even remember my last name, got close, but it was still wrong. She definitely didn't have my address or my date of birth. Turns out, she actually believed she could close down my card armed with nothing but my name, phone number, and those 4 digits. I didn't cancel the card after that, but you bet I asked for a replacement. I was left shaking, wondering what the actual motivation was here. Was it just to make my life hell? The answer, apparently, is yes. Allegedly, my credit card company was super understanding and agreed to send the police the recording of the call, and the number it came from, as long as law enforcement requested it formally. They gave me a direct line and a reference number I handed straight off to the officer. He got on it right away, so that's moving forward as I write this. Over the weekend, I decided to deal with my phone situation. I had my old number transferred to a completely different, ancient phone so I could still monitor any calls or texts, but got myself a brand new number on my main phone. As soon as that was set up, I turned the old phone and number over to the officer working my case. Yesterday, the police visited her. According to the officer, the second she realized things had gotten real, she looked horrified. She claimed not to know her antics could ever cross into actual criminal territory. Since then, silence, no more texts, no more calls, not a single email. I can breathe again. There's a temporary protection order and a no-contact order in place until this goes to court. Meanwhile, I've filed complaints with the State Board of Licensing about everything she's done. All I know is the board is investigating. At this point, the legal process is rolling forward and there's just not a lot else I can talk about until it's over. For now, we're waiting to see what comes next. The past few weeks have been some of the longest I've ever lived through, honestly. But I'm finally sleeping again. I can actually look at my phone without a wave of panic washing over me. I'm just hoping all of this ends with the best possible outcome, and soon. Update 4. I've been getting so many questions about what happened next, so here's everything. Buckle up because it's a wild ride, and it's not short. After everything went down, I didn't exactly feel like reliving any of it, in part because none of what happened over the last year was even remotely enjoyable. The legal process ended with me being granted a 1-year restraining order against the stylist. Getting to court took forever, with delays and continuations for what felt like every reason under the sun, but eventually we finally got our day before the judge. The stylist showed up at every court date, strutting in with all kinds of so-called evidence. They presented, what I'm almost certain was fabricated, proof that I was actually harassing them. Supposed text screenshots from my old number, threatening them, calling them names, and promising to burn down their business. The problem with all their so-called receipts? That phone number was actually in the custody of the investigating officer the whole time. By then, I had already gotten myself a new phone number, and the officer had a certified activity report showing the phone hadn't sent or received anything after I turned it in. There were literally 0 calls or texts. You should have seen the stylist's face when that information came out. I honestly don't think they ever imagined I'd switch my number. They tried twisting the story, suggesting maybe I had someone else do it, or I'd spoof the messages from my new phone, and actually tried to demand my new number as part of discovery. The court didn't grant that request, thank God. Still, law enforcement had to do another certified review of both my current phone and, for extra protection, my husband's as well, just to verify there was no spoofing software or any attempts at contact. That part made my skin crawl, but in the end, it was both humiliating and satisfying. The stylist had a lawyer, but their lawyer wilted during the proceedings. There was 0 confidence in their case, especially with the communication evidence. Their texts just didn't fit the way I write. I don't do text speak with people I barely know, and even my slang is reserved for friends. Everything the stylist presented was riddled with messy, over-the-top fake cop drama talk. Whoever sent those texts, it definitely wasn't me. Long story short, the bench trial ended in my favor. The stylist was ordered to have no contact with me, given a 1-year restraining order, required to pay all my legal fees, and a small damages amount. To this day, I haven't seen a cent of that. For a few weeks after that, it seemed like things might actually settle down. But then, it got ugly. Random notes started appearing on my car when I'd go to the grocery store, vicious little messages about how I'm a bitch and I would get what's coming. Strange cars would drive by the house late at night, sometimes honk repeatedly, sometimes throw eggs. I wasn't born yesterday. I knew exactly who was behind it. Thanks to the restraining order paperwork, the stylist now had my home address. The one thing in my favor was that I have cameras everywhere on our property. Every time something happened, I'd call the cops. Each time, they'd promise to look into it. But the harassment kept happening. Someone even slashed my tire when my husband and I were out for dinner. The restaurant had no cameras covering where we parked, but I have a pretty good idea whose work that was, especially since the salon is only a couple blocks from where it happened. Small towns are great until the downside hits. Everyone knows your business. We kept filing police reports, time after time, documenting every incident. Eventually, the cops started to take real notice. We turned over every bit of footage we had. It turned out that the car on camera wasn't registered to the stylist at all. When police tracked down the owner, they confessed, the stylist had paid them to piss off this bitch, their words, insisting they thought it was just a harmless prank. They got cited for vandalism and disturbing the peace, and were formally warned to stay off our property. That car never came near us again. The stylist, though, was finally hauled in for violating the restraining order. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end. But all they got was a slap on the wrist, and the cycle started back up. Only after the 5th or 6th violation did the stylist end up spending a few nights in jail. And then, as if that wasn't enough, the stylist filed a lawsuit against me for defamation, demanding $200,000. The nerve. They claimed my defamatory remarks cost them both their clientele and their stylist license. News to me, but apparently their license had actually been suspended after a report I filed with the licensing board. The stylist insisted I'd cost them their annual earnings, as if any small-town stylist makes $200,000 a year, and demanded payback, arguing that my restraining order was granted on false evidence and ruined their life and reputation. Of course, I contacted my lawyer again, and we geared up for another fight. My lawyer handled all the necessary defense, and I was advised it was possible, and potentially wise, to countersue, but I just wanted this hellish chapter to end. The defamation lawsuit dragged on, but when we finally got in front of a judge, it was dismissed without prejudice. By that point, my husband and I had had enough. When it came time to renew the restraining order, we decided on a bigger change. We moved. Sold our house, traded in both our cars, just in case, left everything behind, and started fresh somewhere new. I wanted nothing to do with the stylist, ever again, for my sake and those I love. We've been in our new home for about 5 months now, and the difference is night and day, peaceful, quiet, just what we needed. But I can't shake how angry I still am that it came to this. I adored our home, our community, our old neighborhood. Now, all because of one deeply unhinged encounter with my freaky hair stylist, my life was upended for nearly a year. That's the whole story. I'm ready to leave this insanity in the past, and make a new beginning without looking back. Update 5. At 8:12 a.m., an unknown number called while I was making coffee. I let it roll to voicemail. 30 seconds later, my text tone pinged with a message from the same number. Hi, I think this belongs to you. Beneath it was a photo of a clear plastic tote, no lid, packed with hair and dried bits of what looked like potpourri and the faintest dusting of fine grit. My name was on blue painter's tape across the front in the exact blocky, all caps handwriting I'd seen a year ago. On top, a glossy 4x6 print of long, dark hair curled in a circle on checkerboard tile, dated in the bottom corner. My stomach dropped out. I didn't call back from my regular line. I opened Google Voice, made a throwaway number in under a minute, and dialed. A man answered, older, with the exhausted friendliness of someone who's done too many yard sales. He told me he buys defaulted storage units at auction. This one belonged to a stylist in my old town whose account had gone unpaid. He popped the lock, raised the door, and almost shut it right back when he saw the inside. He said there were shelves of totes, each clear, each labeled with a first and last name on tape, a cheap inkjet on a fold-out table, stacks of dated 4x6 prints rubber banded together, and a 3-ring binder with a client log sticker on the front. He flipped to my section, saw my full name, phone number, and a photocopy of a driver's license that wasn't the best quality and wasn't mine. He found my number in the log again in a column labeled primary contact and decided to reach out before throwing anything away. He sounded apologetic and a little spooked. I don't do this, I sell lawn chairs and weed whackers, he said. I'm not trying to be in the middle of whatever this is. I asked him not to send me anything, not to bag it up and drop it at a post office, not to do a single thing beyond closing the door and putting the lock back. He agreed. I hung up and dialed the detective from the old county, the one who handled the restraining order and the credit card nonsense. To his credit, he remembered me right away. I forwarded the text, the photo, and the buyer's number, and by noon he'd called back. He was already on his way to the storage facility with a warrant in progress. By late afternoon, he let me know they'd secured the unit as evidence. Over the next 2 days, the picture came into focus. 27 totes, all labeled. Each had a mix of hair from different dates, dried fragrant filler, and photo prints of the clippings. The binder held client names, numbers, notes about preferred cuts, and in some cases lines labeled billing ref with last 4 digits of cards and expiration months. My name had a notation in red ink, do not serve. Unstable. There were penciled burn dates next to a few names with little flame doodles in the margins. It wasn't illegal to save hair clippings, the detective reminded me. The rest of it, the card data, the binder, is where it crossed into a different category. The storage purchase records tied the unit to the stylist. The facility had ID copies from when the unit was opened. The detective asked whether I'd be willing to give another statement. I said yes. I didn't even have to think about it. I did my deposition from a windowless room at our new county courthouse with a landline on speaker and a notary who kept offering me peppermint candies. The DA's office on the other end asked me to walk through everything I'd already told them a year ago and add anything new. They played the old voicemail where she talked about burning my hair. Hearing my own voice for the first time on a recording, stiff and tiny, introducing myself by full name made my hands shake in a way they hadn't in months. I confirmed my card company had already provided the recorded call where she tried to cancel my account, and the connection between that and the binder's billing ref column wasn't lost on anyone. I half expected the rest to drag on for months again, but it moved fast. The stylist was picked up on a warrant for unlawful possession of others' identifying information, attempted access device fraud tied to the card incident, and a stack of harassment-related violations linked to the old case. There was a preliminary hearing, which I didn't attend. My lawyer filled me in that she looked small in a way she never had in court before. A week later, another email. The state licensing board had concluded its investigation. Her license was revoked outright. Not suspended, revoked, with a 5-year bar on reapplication and mandatory psychological evaluation for any future attempt at licensure in any cosmetology-adjacent field. Enclosed was a dry, bureaucratic line that still made me exhale in a way I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. Complainant will be notified if respondent seeks any reinstatement. 2 Fridays ago, my husband and I were on the couch watching some mindless cooking show when the mail app pinged me about an incoming certified letter. I had to laugh, not because any of this is funny, but because apparently my nervous system has decided the only responses to adrenaline left are laughter or sleep. The envelope was from the DA's office. It was short and to the point. The stylist had taken a plea, no contest to the identity charge and 1 count of harassment. The rest were dismissed. The sentence was probation, community service, fines, restitution, a mental health evaluation, and a prohibition on contacting me or possessing any of my identifying information. They'd seized the contents of the unit. The totes wouldn't be returned to anyone. The photo printer, the binder, all of it, evidence. On Monday, a check hit our mailbox for $26.14 with restitution typed into the memo line. I turned it over 3 times before setting it on the counter. It felt petty and enormous all at once. Money clipped from someone who once tried to send me an invoice for being a bitch, only now stumbling back to me under the dullest possible bureaucratic light. I cashed it. It felt like closing a drawer I'd been bumping my hip on for a year. There's one more part I didn't expect. The detective asked whether I'd consent to having my contact info shared with a small handful of other clients whose names were in the binder, just in case they wanted to compare notes for their own statements. I said I would, but only if he gave my email, not my address or number. 2 women and 1 man reached out. We did a short video call in the early evening, each of us sitting in our own kitchens with the worst overhead lighting making us look tired. We told versions of the same story. They'd noticed the photos. They'd noticed something off. One of them had confronted her months before I ever did and had been brushed off with a watery explanation about artistic portfolios and memory boxes. They were at different stages. One already had a restraining order, one hadn't reported anything until now, and the man, who'd brought his kid in for a trim, had found a Ziploc with a lock of his son's hair in a drawer at the front desk months ago and thought it was an accident. None of us were crazy. None of us had imagined this. Last thing, because it matters to me now in a way it didn't before, I finally found a new stylist in our new city. I booked the appointment on the sheer recommendation of a neighbor with shiny hair. I walked in with my jaw set and my expectations low. I told her what I needed, and when she spun the chair around after the cut, I caught myself scanning the floor reflexively. She saw me looking and asked if I was okay. The words stuck, and then they didn't. I gave her the abbreviated version, the G-rated one, and she didn't make a big deal of it. She swept the hair into the bin, tapped the foot pedal, and waited while I watched the lid close. It was nothing and it was everything. I tipped her more than I meant to. On the way out, I looked at the crisp little A-line bob in the glass and thought, for the first time in a long time, this belongs to me. Update 6. A year ago this week, the plea went through and the mail quieted down. I stopped jumping at my phone. I got comfortable enough to forget where I'd stashed the file folder with my name across the tab, the copies of everything, the careful timeline I'd built out of screenshots and dates. I put it on a shelf in the office closet behind a stack of old sheet sets and meant it, finally, to be over. Last Tuesday at 7:21 a.m., our mailbox app pinged with a preview of the day's incoming envelopes. I was halfway into a robe and halfway through the motion of scooping grounds into the coffee maker when the subject line floated up on my screen in all caps, notice of overpayment determination. The sender was the State Department of Labor, not our current state but the old one. I stood very still. The coffee machine kept its slow burbling rhythm like nothing had happened. I waited for the mail carrier like a dog. When the envelope landed, I sat on the tile in socks and opened it right there. According to the letter, I owed back $427.35 for unemployment benefits paid to me for 3 weeks last spring. It listed a claim number I didn't recognize and the dates of a payment I never received, filed from a county I haven't lived in since we moved. The number at the bottom was an 800. I called it and was ushered through a labyrinth of prompts into a hold line that played a gentle, tinny piano loop. 26 minutes later, a woman who introduced herself as Allie came on with the voice of someone who has said I understand your frustration so many times it's left grooves. I read the letter word for word. She clicked keys and found the claim. She told me, carefully, that the listed phone number was mine from before I switched, the mailing address was an apartment I've never lived at, and the preferred contact email was a Gmail I'd never seen that jammed my initials up against a year that isn't my birth year and ended in 2 numbers that happened to be the last 2 digits of my old card's expiration. There was also an uploaded ID, which she offered to send me as part of a document request if I would attest that I had not, in fact, filed. The PDF came that afternoon. The driver's license was exactly the kind of not quite right image you expect when someone has run a copy of a copy of a copy. The corners were cropped too tight. The hair wasn't mine. The signature was wrong in a way that made my teeth hurt. Someone had traced the general rhythm of my name and then given up halfway through the last letter and just turned the rest into an underline. I called the detective from the old county. I didn't leave a message on a general line this time. I dialed his extension. He still had the cadence of a man who keeps his sentences simple for clarity's sake. I told him about the letter. I told him about the PDF. He asked me to forward it to his email and to the assigned data and then went quiet for a beat that I've learned means he's already running through who to call. He told me he would get a contact at Labor to link it to the existing case, since it likely wasn't the only one. By Friday, the state investigator with a voice like a news anchor had looped me into a conference call with a detective. They wanted an affidavit. They wanted screenshots of my current driver's license and proof of my address and a statement that I had never filed a claim for benefits in the listed timeframe. They wanted permission to pull whatever they could from the phone logs the department kept. I signed what they sent and listened to my own heartbeat in my ears as I pressed my pen into the little box next to the line that read I affirm under penalty of perjury that the above is true. This is the part where the whole thing takes on an almost bureaucratic absurdity. An hour after I sent the affidavit, the investigator called back sounding almost giddy. She'd gotten a hit on the IP address used to file my supposed claim. It traced back to a business account, one that had been shut off the previous summer, the salon's Wi-Fi, under the old owner's name, the one that had leased to the stylist. The timestamp on the claim application lined up with the noon hour on a weekday I happened to have an archived appointment card for from a totally different salon 2 towns away. When the investigator said that out loud, I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the kind of mistake a dumb criminal makes belongs on TV, and here it was in my actual life being narrated to me like a script beat. They asked me if I had time for a short Zoom that afternoon to discuss next steps and include a couple other impacted individuals. I clicked in at 3:03, hair half dry from a shower, no makeup, cabinets behind me in soft focus. 2 faces blinked on. Then a third, a woman with a floral mug introduced herself by first name and said she had 2 claims on her record she never filed. Another woman, hair in curlers, said her husband had gotten a letter. The man I recognized from our 3-person video call last spring reintroduced himself. He had been contacted too. The investigator walked us through what they had already pulled. 3 more claims filed from the same IP with the same pattern. Our old numbers, emails with our initials glued to random digits, green dot cards listed as the bank on file. The salon's router ID was the common thread, and the timestamp skittered across a calendar like someone had gone through a little notebook and picked days at random and plugged them in between haircuts. When I got off the call, I walked into the kitchen and stood in the doorway and watched my husband make a sandwich. He looked up and read my face before I spoke. He set the knife down with that careful, deliberate motion that tells me he is making space for whatever is about to come out of my mouth. "It's the salon Wi-Fi," I said. He closed his eyes and nodded once. I couldn't stop myself after that. Once my affidavit was in, I pulled the file folder out from behind the bed sheets on the closet shelf and put it on the kitchen table. I opened my laptop and put together the plain chronological thing they always ask you for that never feels like how life happened. I copied the claim number from the notice and slotted it in next to the old voicemail that said the word burn like it was a compliment. By Monday, probation had filed for a violation hearing. It wasn't the notice I got first. It was an automated email from the victim notification system with the delicate non-answer subject line, status change. Inside, in small font, it told me the supervision status had shifted from active to pending revocation. The hearing was set for the following Wednesday. I wasn't required to appear, and truly, I didn't want to sit in that stale courtroom again and watch the way her eyes never landed on any one thing long. My lawyer went. He called me from the parking lot with the heater running and told me what I needed to know. The judge wasn't amused. The Stylist public defender made a throat-clearing attempt at chalking it up to a misunderstanding about mail and addresses, and the judge cut them off. Probation revoked. 30 days in county. An extension of the no-contact order. A condition that any devices in her possession be surrendered for forensic imaging. I hung up with my lawyer and took the longest breath I've taken since we moved here. It didn't stop at me. 2 days later, the investigator sent a short email with language so careful it may as well have been wearing a helmet. They had reason to believe 3 more claims, filed from the same IP address around the same window, were linked. The amounts weren't huge, 3 weeks here, 2 weeks there, but it wasn't about the dollars. It was about the weird little collision of trophies and numbers she had curated behind the scenes. Hair and card digits. Photos and expiration months. Burn dates doodled in margins and claim dates typed into fields. None of us were actually losing money in this instance, not directly. The department was. The thing you don't realize until you get a letter like that is how quickly your name being on something it shouldn't be becomes your problem, even when it isn't. You asked what crazy looks like in a quiet life. Here's my version. 3 days after the hearing, an inspector from our current state's cosmetology board stopped into my new salon while I was in a chair with a cape snapped at my neck. She walked through with a clipboard and an easy demeanor and paused at the back where the trash lives. She and my stylist chatted about a new bulletin that went out statewide. Retention and disposal protocols, the inspector said. No clippings stored on site. No personal identifiers recorded beyond scheduling. Don't keep card digits. Don't be weird. She laughed when she said it, but the line sat between us like something famous. When she left, my stylist looked at me in the mirror and lifted her eyebrows. She knows the G-rated version. She didn't say anything else. She swept, tapped the pedal, and we both waited for the lid to close. That afternoon, a reporter called. She'd gotten my number from the DA's office with my permission, because I said yes to being contacted if it meant telling it how it actually happened. She asked thoughtful questions and let me pass on the ones I didn't want to touch. She'd already done the public records requests and had more of the architecture than I expected. When the unit was leased, when the payment stopped, how many times the facility sent notices. She'd interviewed the storage unit buyer and the neighbor 2 doors down from the old salon who remembered the occasional sharp-smelling smoke drifting over the fence on Sunday nights. She asked me if I'd seen the line in the licensing board's final order requiring a psychological evaluation. I said yes and felt something like a mercy in it, toward the next potential client, not toward her. The piece ran online 2 days later. There were no comments, thank God for paywalls. There's one more thing, and I almost didn't include it because it feels small. It isn't. Last week, an embossed envelope dropped into our box with the kind of weight that only comes from official paper stock. Inside was a notice. One of the other clients in the binder had filed a civil suit, a quiet, unflashy one against the salon's former owner's business insurance. It wasn't defamation or damages for the sake of punitive. It was negligence, failure to supervise, failure to secure personal information, failure to retain or destroy data properly. My name was on page 2, not as a plaintiff, but as someone to be notified of the proceedings because my information had been part of the underlying facts. I called the number on the second page, spoke to a paralegal who sounded just a little younger than me, and told her I wasn't joining. I wanted to know when it ended. That was all. She said she'd add me to the list. The detective called yesterday from a number I finally recognized without reading it twice. He said the forensic guys pulled 3 old iCloud backups off of devices from the apartment she had shared with someone for a few months. The someone had turned over a tablet she'd left behind. In those backups were more photos. Not just hair curls and tiled floors. Pictures of prints laid out on a kitchen table, dates written in the corner, orders of service for funerals tucked under the edges as if weighing them down. He told me this like he knew I would hear the thing under the facts. There was grief in it. There was control. There was ugliness. There was nothing occult, nothing cinematic. Just a cheap printer, loose tape, numbers in the margins, a person who kept too much of other people in ways they never consented to and then tried to turn those scraps into leverage. I realized, sometime around dusk, that the file folder is back on top of the shelf in the office closet and my shoulders aren't trying to live in my ears anymore while it sits there. I didn't put it away tonight, but I will. I don't know if this is the end. I've learned not to say that. But I can tell you what happened this morning. I went back to my new stylist and asked for a trim. She combed my hair forward, snipped clean angles and soft lines, and spun me around. I looked at my reflection and didn't have the reflex to look for a toad in the periphery. She swept, tapped the pedal, and I watched a neat rectangle of plastic slide shut over something that no longer felt like mine. I paid. I tipped too much. On the sidewalk outside, I caught my reflection in the window and only saw a woman in a coat she likes, hair doing exactly what it should in late winter light.